Hello and welcome to our third and final special edition of The Briefing, concluding our presentation of highlights from Monocle Radio's recent reporting trip and pop-up radio studio at the World Governments Summit in Dubai. I'm Tom Edwards. The WGS took place in early February at the Madinat Jumeirah in Dubai. It's an annual gathering that's become one of the key fixtures in the diplomatic calendar, with attendees including presidents, prime ministers and policymakers from all around the world. In our third and final special programme, we're focusing on the guests we welcomed on the final day of the 2026 WGS. And we'll hear from a couple of distinguished guests who joined Monocle Radio at our evening event at the incredible Jumeirah Marsa Al Arab on the Wednesday evening of WGS week a little later too. But let's start with His Excellency Omar Al-Olama, Minister for AI. He spoke to me and to Monocle's Gulf correspondent, Inzamam Rashid, about the WGS, about the current discourse in AI, and about his hopes for the future.
I actually am feeling very optimistic, very emboldened that the future is going to be better than the present. And the reason why, the unfortunate narrative that the news, the conventional news that we get is that it's going to be turmoil, it's going to be conflict, things are turbulent, because fear sells. But when you get people together and you have such a diverse array of people from every continent, whether it's heads of state, whether it's CEOs, and their narrative is constant that we don't really care about the issues that are currently being discussed in the media. What we care about is development for our people. What we care about is learning from each other. And that really makes you feel like, okay, it is not as bad as we thought it was. One thing that made me very happy is sometimes you hear things in the media about two opposing parties that might be, there might be tension between them. They might be at a point where they might go into conflict with each other. When you see them sit together, have conversations, you realize that it's not as bad as it's portrayed. And I hope that this continues not just for the 3 days of the summit, but for the 365 days to follow.
It's interesting you say that, Your Excellency, because we spoke to Dr. Anwar Gargash the other day here in the Monocle Radio studio, and we spoke about how actually this summit has fallen on a bit of a backdrop of a couple of things. Obviously, the issues in the Middle East right now, but also actually the fact that the UAE has played this role as mediator when it comes to bringing together US, Ukraine and Russia just last week and obviously this week as well. The timeliness of the World Government Summit has been really interesting because we've seen world leaders from all around come together whilst these issues are going on in the UAE as well. It really feels that the UAE is this absolute hub of diplomacy right now, conversation and essentially negotiation and mediation as well. Is that fair to say?
It is, and I think it's a great coincidence that you're saying this at this point of time, because yesterday both Azerbaijan and Armenia formally signed a peace treaty between both countries, ending many years of conflict. And I think the summit's dates don't change. It's usually around the first or second week of February. But the world's actually finding a platform to come together and discuss, let's say, things of mutual interest, things that can help accelerate the end of conflict. And this is, I think, the value that the summit brings. But the UAE has become this good Samaritan. It's become a country that brings everyone together for a better future. And this is why we exist. Think about it. Now, I will tell you there is the marketing side of things, but the reality of this is we are a country that thrives on globalization. The more open the world, the more the world partners with each other, the more we thrive as a nation. So there is also an interest for us to bring the world together because when that happens and when that is optimized, you see that millennia of development and millennia of history, the UAE has always been a place that is relevant in the map when the world works together. So 4,000 years ago, there's an archaeological site called Saruq al-Hadid. And Saruq al-Hadid is where the Egyptian civilization 4,000 years ago and the Indian civilization 4,000 years ago used to do business. This is where they used to trade, this is where their commerce used to come, and it was a neutral country that they can both trust, they can do business in without being cheated. So that's 4,000 years ago. 200 years ago, spices, textile, and certain other things used to come to this part of the world. So every single time the world is open for commerce, the UAE thrives, and this part of the world thrives. And we want to ensure that as a country we are a platform for that, a platform that brings the world together, a platform that tries to end conflict, and a platform that tries to increase commerce, because we thrive on commerce and we thrive on the world being open.
Can I ask a question about WGS in particular? And you know, I don't want to play the comparison game to Davos and to other big summits around the world, but as a journalist on the ground here in the UAE, it feels like this year in particular, there is a real sense of openness when it comes to being able to question yourself as a minister within the UAE, other world leaders as well. And I've always felt for WGS to be able to stand out from the other summits, it needs that openness, it needs that robustness, it needs the opportunity to ask the difficult questions. Is that something that WGS, yourself, the UAE has been working on to make sure it can stand out from the other summits as well, being open and being able to answer those difficult questions?
I don't think there is a comparison. And the reason why I don't think there is a comparison is because the world needs more convenings. It needs more events where people come together, they discuss their differences, and they actually find more opportunities that make them alike, right? So I don't think it's whether you come to Davos or you come to the WGS. I think you should go to all of them if you can. Different groups will find value in different events in different ways. You know, if you really care about business, then you'd go to Davos, and Davos is a business event that has government. So I always say that Davos is a business-focused event with a flavor of government. We are a government-focused event with a flavor of business. But just on what stands out for the government summit, I think there are three main fundamental differences between the government summit and any other event that happens that is of a similar size and has a similar crowd. The first is we're not here to preach our values or our value systems or our thoughts to the world. We're here to learn from the world and help the world learn from each other. If you're coming from Zimbabwe, I'm not going to come and tell you that you need to have a political system that's like the UAE. I'm not going to come and promote what we're doing to tell you that you have to do it. I'm actually here to listen from you, and hopefully through the discourse, through the dialogue, through the sessions that you're going to attend, you might learn something that will help you benefit your people. So that is a fundamental difference. We are not here to push our agenda on people. We're actually here to get the people to bring their agendas to us and to teach each other. The second important thing is we are optimists by nature. So we look for opportunities, we look for the positive, we look for a better future. So the discussions at the government summit are either discussions on what can be done. So if there's something you can't do anything about, like, okay, there is a fundamental issue that people are talking about, which is an asteroid can hit the Earth and kill half of humanity. Okay, this could happen tomorrow, it could happen in 10 years, it could happen in 100 years. We don't discuss this topic because there's very little we can do about it today. We might discuss it in a side topic somewhere, just as a fun thing to discuss. But there
Is that a fun thing to discuss?
No, it is a fun thing to discuss.
Kind of conversations the minister has, I think.
Because, I'll tell you, it's a fun thing to discuss because all scenarios lead to a great set of dialogues on what we can do together. So there is a program, I think, that NASA is working on right now on how do we, have satellites that help deviate the trajectory of meteors and comets and asteroids. I think it's a fun topic. How do we do it? How do we reach that point? What investments need to be put in place? It's actually something that would tickle your brain. It's a nice topic to discuss.
You must know where the best bunker is to hide in.
Not yet, but I will figure this out at one point of time. But what topics we care about, okay. If you want to leapfrog, if you haven't gone through the digitalization process that we've gone through as the UAE, for example, or the US has gone through, or China, and you are a developing nation, how do you leapfrog? Do you need to go to eGov, mGov, SmartGov, and then AIGov? Or can you go from eGov to AIGov straight away? That's an important topic that is going to serve millions of people in that country. Those are the topics that we discuss. So topics where you can do something about them, you can create an opportunity for your people, and there is also things that can be done between countries. And then the third thing that happens here is we don't choose sides. This is not East versus West. This is not NATO versus whoever else. We actually want to be the place where everyone can come. And sometimes people will criticize you for that. But what you mentioned on US, Russia, Ukraine, that could not happen in a country that says Russia is not allowed and we don't want to talk to Russia. We don't want to say that this is a platform for a specific group of people. This is a platform for the world. and hopefully the world is going to get value out of it.
One of the most stimulating chats of the week at WGS was the conversation I enjoyed with two whip-smart speakers, Josh Hecker, GM of Political Risk at Dow Jones, and Anand Juan, GM Middle East Dow Jones. Let's hear from them next.
I think if you look over the last 12 months, one of the things we've really seen from our current customers and the customers we've been starting to support over the last 6 months is that increased appetite, both for risk within the region, but to be part of this riskier global order elsewhere. And I think one of the reasons that we've invested so heavily in geopolitical risk as a business practice at Dow Jones is that, and why we're here to support that in the Middle East, is that we're seeing an appetite both from public and private sector here to not just be regional players anymore, but really to have the prominence they deserve and the prominence that I think they've shown themselves capable of on the world stage.
So obviously, Anand, you've got this sort of Middle East lens, but I guess part of the challenge and the opportunity is to be reflecting that inwardly and outwardly. Do you feel you're working at one of the critical kind of intersections in terms of the global geopolitical landscape being here with that as your focus?
Absolutely. I mean, when I joined Dow Jones as the Middle East GM, my objective was not just to look at bringing the American perspective to the region, but really bring the regional narrative to the rest of the world. And I think that's essentially what it's been about. This region's growing tremendously. The rate of change is rapid, be it in AI, energy, technology, you name it, right? So they're at the forefront of everything that's happening. We feel it's the right moment for us to be scaling and expanding in the region. The interesting bit is, it's not like we were not here. We've always been here on the ground. We've had the presence. There's an extra emphasis on making sure that we're part of that journey, that growth story. And I think that's partly why we're here at World Government Summit as well. I've been at this event a couple of times. I've been in Dubai for the last, 20-odd years. So I've seen it sort of evolving as well. And even the World Government Summit, if you look at the attendees, it's a nice mix of, policymakers, technologists, business leaders, and academics, right? Which is very rare that you bring all of these people in the same place to have these conversations which cater to and tackle real-life challenges that governments are facing.
And it's funny, a narrative that keeps coming up actually to whomever we speak here is this idea about the superpower being this convening power, and it's global east, global west, global south, but it's across disciplines and it's so much more productive, it seems. Talk to me a little bit, Josh, about the willingness here, it seems to me, maybe you don't agree with this, to not just talk about risk but to seek it out, to really get into it, and not just then kick it around in a kind of abstract academic way, but to tear into it, take it apart and say, what are we going to do about this? And what are we going to do quickly to address it? That's another regional superpower, maybe.
No, I think that's absolutely true. And it's, for a long time, there's been a sense that there is a willingness to take financial risk from the region. But now I think we're seeing risk in a lot of other avenues, not just monetarily, but in terms of the problems that, to your point, they're willing to tackle and to be a convener of how do they solve that problem for broader parts of the world. I think one of the panels that we had a participant from our group speak on yesterday really touched on the shifting demographics in the world and how kind of the shifting in age and all of these different rising powers is really pivotal to how we think about what the world's going to look like in 30 or 40 years. And it's regions like the Middle East with kind of a coming of age in a great way population, and at that intersection of both energy prominence, technology prominence, and financial prominence, where that kind of all comes together to let them play a leading role. And I think you see that with the types of people that are here this year, even versus what was here last year or the year before. There's a recognition that this organization they've kind of pulled together is leading the way on tackling thorny changes that are not just this year problems. They're not just of this moment, but they're really kind of generational problems that this region is trying to be a leader on.
And it's really finding its voice, it seems to me, whether they're talking about soft power and diplomacy or on a harder policy basis. Let's actually zoom out and talk a bit about that idea of finding voice, the quality of the discourse. And then, a lot of the talk, certainly on the other side of the Atlantic from where I'm based in the UK, is about it's actually increasingly difficult to articulate a point of view because you're beaten down or there's a polarized agenda and you've got to be black and white on one thing or another. Where do you stand on that? I think you guys are pretty good at articulating your vision, but is it becoming more difficult to have a point of view?
Well, listen, there's a lot of misinformation out there, right? Part of what we bring to the table is trusted journalism. What's lacking now is not the amount of information. It's more about credible information that you can rely on. And I think that's where we play a credible part. We play a crucial element in bringing that trusted data and intelligence to organizations, to governments, to make those decisions. So I think that's what differentiates us in terms of how we look at this, right? The whole information space. And a lot of the conversations at World Government Summit are very much centered around those themes. If you see this time around, there's a lot of depth in the conversations. Even some of the sessions and the panels that we've been in, like Joshua was mentioning about Nick Redmond, our editor-in-chief of Oxford Analytica, who was on one of the panels, spoke very candidly about the demographic shifts and how that's impacting economic growth and sort of the geopolitical landscape across the region.
Monocle's editor-in-chief, Andrew Tuck, and I were fortunate to enjoy so many great conversations through the week. One we particularly enjoyed was a truly future-forward catch-up with the excellent Kalfan Belhoul, CEO of the Dubai Future Foundation.
The biggest blessing we have is we're in a country that is just 50 plus years old, and people tend to think that this is a country that's hundreds of years old. I remember the days when I was in college, which was even maybe 100 years ago. I used to tell people I'm from Dubai, I studied in the States, and people would ask where Dubai is. Unfortunately, at that time, I had to relate to unfortunate circumstances in the region, like the Gulf War. So I had to relate to, do you know when Iraq is in Kuwait? We're a small city next to that area, and people would start to relate. Now, fast forward in this short period of time, when you go abroad and you say you're from Dubai or the UAE, it's one of those two answers. It's either, wow, I've been there, or I've heard so much and I want to go there, which has turned a lot of things. I'm not saying we're perfect, but some things have happened, and I'm going to allude to them, that have really created this speed of development. And they all evolve around visionary leaders that really have prosperity and focus on the human as their priority, beyond anything else. There's less interest in geopolitics, there's zero interest in conflicts. We're more about connecting dots, building bridges, making friends. As small as we are as a country, we are super ambitious. And with that, I think you see the result. It's a country that was depending on oil at its infancy, and now with the diversity of its population, of its investments, of its GDP, we see it going from strength to strength.
I've been coming here for 20 years, and for me to see the progress of Dubai, of the UAE over that time is also extraordinary. I just wanted to pick up one word, because you talked there also about hinting that there's also a need to think about how people feel in spaces, the softer side of city making, because I think sometimes when people think about the future of the city, of course AI is important, smart cities are important, but is it also important for you that people feel a sense of attachment and love and passion for the place as well?
My friend, this is even more important than AI. This is actually the core of how this country is driven. And I'll give you several examples. I mean, as much as we, of course, embrace technology and we know it's going to have a major impact on all jobs, including our jobs and maybe even those kind of interviews, even though we enjoy humans and
Please not.
No, absolutely not. I don't think anyone can replace your skills. Of course, I mean, there will be efficiencies, but I think the idea is that humans should be in the forefront. And we've noticed this through different challenges that came to us throughout this journey, whether it's the pandemic and our focus on health and safety. As much as the lockdown has created such an economical damage to the city, which is normal, a city that depends a lot on logistics, tourism, travel, would definitely be harmed. But at that time, it was the focus on what matters the most for humans. And that time, it was their health and safety. Opened up, welcomed everyone with open arms, and focused on priority things. They weren't AI and they weren't investments or financial gains. It was, how do we make sure people are safe and happy in the city? Which means they travel well to the city, they get welcomed in the best way, they find best healthcare systems, best education system, very diverse community, and most importantly, safety for them and their kids. We tend to underestimate all those components, but I truly believe, and the leadership truly believe, that those are the main drivers. And then, of course, the enablers that attract business are technology, investments, the hedge funds of the world that come here to look at opportunities, yes, but make no mistake, they're humans at the end of the day, and they want the best life for them and for their children.
You mentioned the best of so many different things, and at Monocle we're kind of obsessed with benchmarking excellence in every facet, in cities, in placemaking, in business best practice. It's funny, Dubai, I guess, was looking to those benchmarks, like Andrew said, 20 years ago. Now people are coming here to see and find their benchmarks. Where and how do you look for the next set of benchmarks? Is it particular places you go? Is it an attitude you take with you on your travels to observe? Where do you source your next set of great ideas from?
So that's amazing you mentioned this. Of course, we always learn, and we will constantly learn from other cities and countries, which remain to be areas of learning, and we travel around the world and understand. We don't say we're the best. We definitely strive to be the best. And yes, in the past, we definitely looked at different cities, and now we're right up there with the leading cities. And this will continue to be the case. We learn from one another. But what keeps us going and really raising the bar at this stage is actually the push we have from leaders and the support and the delegation and trust. And I can't forget one of the things that personally happened to me. I've been blessed also to oversee sports, and we have inaugurated the World Sports Summit last year, and we were blessed to have any athlete that you can imagine attending the first inaugural one, whether it's from a federation perspective, and Gianni Infantino or Novak or Khabib or Usyk or Ronaldo, or you name them, I can go. There are more than 100 athletes that came in. And while we were handing the awards to the athletes in the award ceremony, I was standing next to His Highness Sheikh Hamdan. He looked at me and said, we need to make this even bigger. So for me, I was at a moment of satisfaction of where we have achieved, but the Crown Prince was actually looking at a bigger ambition and a vision for version number 2. So it's not only benchmarking, it's also the push for us to do even more every single year is what keeps us always on the toes, and to constantly try to deliver something that makes everyone really appreciate that efforts that happen here.
Also on day 3 of the WGS, Inzamam Rashid and I were fortunate to speak to Saeed Al-Ghargawi, Vice President of the Dubai Chamber of Digital Economy. Here's some of the conversation. Listen, let's set the scene in terms of the vibrancy of the digital economy. I know there's some amazing numbers in the last 12 months, the number of digital startups and new businesses that you've helped to support. Tell us a bit about the ecosystem that's driving that growth. What's powering those amazing numbers?
Sure, absolutely. So I think, it's a mix of a few things. One is, of course, the economic activity and the growth that's happening in the region, as well as the stability when it comes to aspects relating to currency. We're pegged to the dollar, so for many investors, the fluctuation in currency is a risk that they don't need to think about. The stability as well from a political and government side, where a lot of the strategies, the policy that are being initiated are all for the business community. And then another thing is for folks to think about is Dubai is a city of merchants for merchants, right? And people, because they see the buildings, they don't get to hear a bit of that history. And so as a result, really, what was then put together is where my organization comes along, which is a chamber of commerce that represents the private sector, sits between government and private sector for the benefit and representation of the tech ecosystem here in Dubai. And so they have a one-stop shop that they can vent. So part of my job is I'm a part-time therapist.
Is that the fun part of the job?
Unfortunately, it's not. So that's a part of it. A part of it is we go and actually speak to government entities for multiple ways. One is, of course, advocacy. The other is just awareness in terms of, hi, there's this particular development that's happening. We're seeing an increase in investment in this particular sector within the digital economy. And second of all is Dubai, and this is something that we tell companies, don't look at the Dubai ecosystem. Utilize the support functions that it has for you to use Dubai as a platform for growth. An example is we at the Dubai Chambers have 35 plus offices around the world, and those act as a concierge service to Dubai companies, right? So from something as simple as, I want to know what's the market for iron in Ghana, all the way to help me set up my office in Tokyo and then find clients and arrange for meetings. And so you have this interesting ecosystem that's purely private sector driven, by the way. So because, again, going back to the merchant mentality, government here in Dubai in particular does not tend to, we have an ethos of government not being in the way of private sector, if so very rarely. And so for those that want to be able to do what they want with that flexibility and freedom, and then get the support from a legislation side, from connectivity, from access, then Dubai is the right way to do it. So it's a mix of all of these put together.
Do you think, Saeed, as well, that this is what has made Dubai stand out? I mean, not just here in the UAE, within the other Emirates and within the Gulf, but actually within the world, being so forward, being so far ahead in digitalizing its economy. And do you think that's what's attracted big names here as well? I know recently there's been a lot of conversation about Revolut potentially kind of relocating here, and then they haven't, and then they have it. And maybe you can clear that up for us a little bit as well. But is that part of the attraction?
That's certainly a part of it. The main part from what we're seeing is just here within the World Government Summit, you have all of these organizations, whether private sector, whether government. We just had a roundtable with family offices and VCs, literally just 5 minutes ago, where we brought all of the main VCs in the region. We brought all of the sort of family offices in Dubai that are interested. And so instead of them having to meet everyone and taking 6 months to do so, to understand and get a feel of the ecosystem, it's one meeting, they get to do that. The other thing is, of course, access to the leadership here. Leadership here really likes to hear from the private sector and likes to hear from people. So you don't need to go through bureaucracy to be able to do it. It's very easy, and then even the feedback loop is quite efficient. So as a result, when we hear something, it tends to be actioned quite quickly, and we get pressured from leadership to be able to deliver very quickly because they are just either really interested in this particular aspect. So yes, that's one aspect of it, but from what we're seeing, it's that human touch, away from tech, surprisingly, that allows companies to feel comfortable enough to be able to use Dubai as this hub for them.
Can I ask about the Revolut
Sure.
position?
I'm not aware of the details, but from what I can tell, it's a filing error. But that's from what I can tell.
And so they plan to move here permanently?
I mean,
you've been having?
From what I haven't been having really close conversations with them. But if you look at their hiring spree in the region, they do spend a lot of time here. And I think potentially that's not out of question.
Now, as well as our guests at Monocle's studio on the main WGS site, we also welcomed friends old and new and other luminaries at Monocle's event on the Wednesday evening, which took place at the beautiful Jumeirah Marsa Al Arab. As well as the wonderful view, refreshing drinks and superb company, we made some time at our radio desk to catch up with more fascinating folks. One of those was Fleur Pellerin, founding partner of Corellia Capital. Fleur was previously French Minister for Culture and Communication. Here's a little of our conversation.
The reason why I came is that I've been spending a lot of time in Asia, and especially in South Korea, for fundraising and also for deal sourcing. But I said to myself in 26, my resolution is like, I need to spend more time in other geographies that I know less. And Middle East is one of them. So I said to myself, I need to start making connections here because the place is very vibrant. I think there's a lot of interesting connections to make between, also bridges to build between Middle East and Asia and Korea, and maybe with France. So I'm trying, to create sort of triangle between Asia, France, and Middle East.
Now, I don't want you to give away your trade secrets, but when you and your colleagues are looking at what makes a really compelling tech investment, there's lots of money sloshing around. What are the kinds of criteria that you use? And it's interesting, do you train that public service lens? I think that's really interesting. Is that helpful maybe? Or do you actually have to really try and divorce that in your mind from your decision making?
Actually, not really, because a lot of sectors, so we're sector agnostic and we invest in Series B and later stages. So we're late venture, early growth. But actually, a lot of sectors are quite regulated, not heavily, but some are quite regulated, especially in France or in Europe, where we like regulation. And
all that red tape we've been hearing about.
We're trying to work on that, but it's not easy. And I think having, connections or an experience in administration, local governments is always very useful, actually. One of our best portfolio companies in our first flagship fund is Bolt, so with the European competitor to Uber. And this is a kind of company that has to deal with local governments, with regulation. So, knowing how to navigate this kind of environment is definitely something that is very useful. And you don't find that skill set usually in private equity or in VC funds. So I think, my value proposition is quite unique in that sense.
Well, I was going to ask you about this because one of the things that I've been talking about with governmental leaders today, but big corporate leaders as well, is this idea of that hybridity and trying to be interdisciplinary in one's approach and looking at what happens at the intersections of these interesting areas, tech and brand and government or whatever it might be. Is that what makes an exciting opportunity, that intersectionality?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly that. So, for example, when I started fundraising for this consumer brand, like this premium consumer brand strategy, I thought that our positioning, which is to build a bridge between Europe and Asia, or France and Korea, but Europe and Asia, but also having this tech know-how, like we know about e-commerce, we know about innovation, we know about AI. It's something that brings a lot of value for people who have brick and mortar brands, but who wants to optimize their distribution channels, who want to be more on digital, who want to make their supply chain greener, for example. So I think being at the crossroad of this, skill sets and know-how, I think is a great value proposition.
Let's roll the clock back a little bit. I'm interested in your work, particularly when you were Minister of Culture. Do you think that France is a very good practitioner at soft power, and they understand the value of brand France or Fabrique en France, whatever it might be? Did you find in your day-to-day work that you were the steward of a department and of a nation that understood its value as a cultural powerhouse, or did it leave much to be desired?
Actually, I don't think so. So I think the one who understand this are the private corporates. They understand the value of this, like, IP, made in France. They understand it very well. I think the French government or the French state relies too much on the heritage, like, okay, we have the Château de Versailles, we have the Louvre. We don't have to be very aggressive in our public policies, like smart power policies. French language used to be spoken in many countries around the world, like in Africa, etc. We don't have a very clear policy as to how to use that as a smart power tool. And so I was very frustrated. And when I compare it to for example, the smart power policy of Korea, which is called Hallyu, which is a Korean wave, which has been going on for like decades, and whatever the government, colored, I was very frustrated because I don't think that in France we realize the power of this smart power policy. Because when it comes to culture, we feel that we shouldn't speak about money or about business model because it's a bit dirty. Whereas I think Korea has managed to do an amazing job. You look at the cinema, it's commercial success, but it's also critical success.
And finally, wrapping up this third special edition of the show, we caught up with a man who previously called Dubai home and is now stationed in Abu Dhabi. Radha Chris Pandey, Ambassador of Canada to the UAE. He focuses on strengthening bilateral relations, economic cooperation and trade. Chris told me more about his story, his work and his approach to diplomacy.
Look at what they have built. This country is 54 years old. There was nothing here virtually at the beginning of the foundation of the country, and they have built this. I think that you've got the combination, the power combination of Dubai and this integrated brand which executes projects beautifully, which has tremendous monuments, which has an integrated approach to providing visitors with an exquisite experience. And then Abu Dhabi, the much more strategic, more methodical, capital-rich environment, which makes big bets on companies and countries. From that strong base, they can convene. I think that's where the strength comes.
Well, you mentioned integrated brands there. Let's just detour slightly. What about Brand Canada? An amazing moment. Obviously, I work for a Canadian founder of Monocle. Your PM is doing some pretty good work at the moment. He's really grabbed the limelight, in a way with a return to some, can I do with quote marks, traditional diplomatic values. A proud Canadian at moments like that?
Well, I'm always proud of a Canadian Prime Minister.
That was a poor question.
I'm a professional proud Canadian. I think that Prime Minister captured a sense of the zeitgeist where people are concerned about the loss of or the diminution of certain institutions and certain practices. And he put his foot forward for an approach to moving ahead, that we are not powerless, that we can seek to be in control of our destiny, and that like-minded countries should be thinking about how they can work together in order to advance their interests. I think that's what he did very effectively, as he did when he visited the UAE in November.
Well, let me ask you about the opportunity then for Canada in this moment, because there is this broader concern about the discourse, whether that's journalistic or the political discourse, the societal discourse. Can we find some silver lining in that slightly cloudy scenario and say, look, actually, if you go back to those values, if you articulate your brand properly, whether you're leading a nation or a business, whatever it might be, there's a real opportunity here to make an enduring impact?
I certainly agree that there are significant opportunities. We must all be looking at our core strengths. The Prime Minister has been very clear on Canada focusing on its core strengths and looking to enhance that. One of the reasons he came to the UAE, why he went to Qatar, why he went to China, was to build trade relations, was to attract capital, indicate that Canada is open for business, and he's been very clear about the practical nature of our engagement with the world.
Let's throw things forward. I've been profoundly encouraged by the quality of the discussion, the enthusiasm for convening at WGS. You've got this amazing vantage point, Dubai via China, via Canada, of course, via Abu Dhabi. Are you still optimistic about the direction of travel?
I think that everything you see here gives you optimism that you can, with the right strategy, with the right commitment to execution, you can deploy capital, intelligence, AI, and labor to surmount tremendous problems and challenges and create really prosperous futures for everyone concerned. I think the UAE is a tremendously optimistic place, and from a Canadian perspective, we're really pleased to have a close and meaningful partnership with this country because together we can achieve tremendous results.
And that brings us to the end of this final special edition of The Briefing on Monocle Radio, featuring highlights from our reporting and from our pop-up studios at the 2026 World Government Summit in Dubai. This programme was produced and edited by Sam Impey. I'm Tom Edwards. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.